voice17104.com. This is Zanetta Wingfield, and you're listening to the voice17104.com. The voice17104.com. Welcome to Did You Know? Podcast, your host, Richard Utley, dedicated to the African American viewers. The program is aimed to celebrate African American culture and deal with the real and relevant topics that impact the everyday lives of the African American community through frank and insightful dialogue with local and national influencers. Every day, there's another horrible, discouraging news story, directly or indirectly, impacting African Americans. But we need to look at the shining stars in the galaxy of Black America. It is time to tell our story.
Good day, good day. I'm sure many of you are kind of confused because you know I do my program on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. But coming up next Tuesday, we have a problem, a technical problem there. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do it live today and then replay it on Tuesday. So if you're kind of looking at your Facebook page and say, what's he doing on there? He's supposed to be on next week. So that's why we're doing it today. And we still have a good program today. So, and if you like the program, you can always tell some friends. I think I'm going to kick off my program this morning with a quote. Our nation is a rainbow, red, yellow, brown, black, and white. And we're all precious in God's sight. And that's by Jesse Jackson. Now, why did I want to open up with that? The reason I wanted to open up with that is, as you know, this program is Did You Know? And many of you may not be aware that the U.S. Citizens and Immigration Service is weighing changes to the citizen test that will be added to English-speaking section of questions. So a lot of you who are trying to become U.S. citizens, they're talking about changing it. And that will have a major impact on you. And the reason I'm bringing it up, because a lot of times we wait to the last minute to either understand it, and then it's too late. Because you know, I'm a big believer that I accuse us many times of saying we have a tendency to wait till the horse gets out the barn and up the road, and then we have some issues. So I think that those of you who have relatives who are not citizens in the United States but want to become citizens in the United States, that you need to be up on this. And I think all of you are aware who this affects. It's going to affect people all over, because I'm sure a lot of you have grandparents or aunts and uncles that speak their native language, and they really haven't really concentrated on English or the whole thing about history. I was doing some research. What they were trying to do is that the applicant needs to name one of 5 answers. So, you know, before, you know, you could say, World War I, II, Korea, you could just name one. They may now tell you may need to name all 5 of them. That's how it works. So I just want you to know that that's very important, and please stay up on it, because if you don't, some of you are going to be very frustrated. And those of you think that you're part of the melting pot of America, you are part of it, but it's going to become very difficult for some of your relatives or some of you to become a part of it. So I just wanted to bring it up, and I think that's a very important thing. You know, the other thing is, I talk about it all the time, is just gun violence. We lose so many young people all the time with this crazy shooting. I'm very troubled because I've said 100 times that we can't go places because we're afraid. I was talking to somebody today, and they were saying, oh, I want to go to this concert, I want to go to this show, but I'm scared. Now, is that right? No. They're scared to go out to enjoy themselves, and they said, I hope everybody acts respectable. And of course, I said, I believe everybody will act respectable, and I'm hoping that, because we know in the 4th of July, there were a lot of people that died. We know 5 people died in Philadelphia, 2 wounded. 3 died in Fort Worth, Texas, 8 wounded. 2 died in Baltimore, 28 wounded. 4 died in Shreveport, Louisiana, 7 wounded. That's crazy. And we're going to have to do a better job protecting our community. We say that all the time, and I think that we all going to have to pull together. We've always heard that thing that it takes a village to raise a family, and there's a lot of truth to that. But some kind of way, we're going to have to let people know that life is very important. And even though sometimes I think that people don't realize that once you shoot somebody, you can't take it back. And you may be sorry, but you've affected yourself, you've affected your family, and you affected the victims as well. We have come to this that we're scared to go out anywhere. We got to do a better job. So let's try to be more kinder, gentler, and much more pleasant to our fellow human being, to our fellow neighbor. Maybe this will help. I don't know, but we got to do something because we're losing a lot of people. It's not fair for those people who cannot leave those particular neighborhoods that they live in. So I'm going to keep bringing it up all the time. I'm tired of it, but we just see so many people die, getting shoot over foolishness and craziness. And some of you out there, you better think about it. Think about before you do that. Put it in perspective. Let's take a little small bathroom. Just think if you had to be in a little small bathroom, let's say it was a cell, and you had to be in there 23 hours a day, 365 days a year. Think about it. Or think about somebody restricting you to tell you when you get up, when you go to sleep, and what you eat. I know some of you young people, because I know this because I talk to a lot of young people, some of you think going to prison is a badge of courage. You can't get it back. You can't get those years back. So think about some of the craziness that you are thinking about doing or that you have done. We are killing ourselves. And we got to do something to try to put a halt. Because every day we see a tragedy on TV or in the newspaper or radio. And it bothers me because we got so much positive stories to tell, and that we don't get them out because they always want to bring the negative stuff out. All right, what else I want to talk about? Real quickly, I'm sure many of you are aware there was a big race riot in France because an African had gotten killed. And of course, a lot of people tried to bring it on race. And you may not know, in France, they don't discuss racism. The race of the police officer who fatally shot the French teenager during the traffic stop last night has not been disclosed, and there's no reason. Why would it be? Because they do not say race in France. So you need to be aware of that. That goes to show you, we know there's racism there, and we know there's situations there. But in France, they do not identify. I just thought I would bring that up to you because I thought it was very important. Well, today I have a person on that I think that will be very good, and we're going to bring on somebody, Tasha Williams. And Tasha is a good friend of mine, and she's running for judicial position. And one of the things I want to tip this with, I've told you before, judicial is very important. You found that out with the Supreme Court. You found that out with district justices, common police court. We have to start getting people to run for those positions that affect us. You may not realize it. And me and Latasha's going to talk about it today. She's a practicing attorney, and we're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about what possessed her to decide to want to run for judicial? You know, I like to be very upfront with everybody. I do support her. So I want everybody to know that I do support her, and I have supported her, and I will continue to support her. And why? Because I think it's important that we run people that understand us. And we're going to get into the details of that today, and hopefully you will see how important it is. And some of you out there should be running for those offices. But as I say that you should be running for those offices, we should support you as well. Whether it's politically, financially, we should do things to try to help the people we're asking to run to be very successful. So Latasha, would you like to go on and talk about who you are? I've had you on before, but some people don't know who you are, so tell them who you are and what you're about.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Rich, for having me on your podcast today. My name again is Latasha Williams, and I am running to be your next judge on our Dauphin County Court of Common Pleas. The Court of Common Pleas is a very diverse bench in terms of the types of issues and cases it presides over. It's everything under the sun, from your family law issues such as divorce, custody, child support, juvenile delinquency matters where children are accused of crimes, as well as juvenile dependency matters, wherein issues arise that may call for a child to be removed from their home, either temporarily or permanently. The court also presides over all matters criminal. So once a case is decided at the magisterial district justice level, it then elevates up to the Court of Common Pleas for final disposition. So we're talking about, anything from retail theft to sexual offenses and homicide. The court also presides over civil matters, matters wherein a person is injured and sustains loss or injury, and they want to sue the person they believe is responsible for that loss. And then there's these other pockets of civil law, such as what happens when a person passes away and they don't leave a will to dictate who receives their property. So there are also municipal matters, such as, there's a company that wants to erect a billboard in your community, and it goes through the zoning hearing board. And then for whatever reason, one of the parties wants to appeal that decision, that will go up to the Court of Common Pleas as well. And so the court decides a variety of issues, and that's the seat that I am seeking. The seat was occupied by Judge Richard Lewis, who is still serving on the bench, but he has retired to senior status. And so that has created an opening, and there are two candidates who are pursuing that vacancy. I am a resident of Susquehanna Township. I also serve as a commissioner for Susquehanna Township. I am one of 9 sitting commissioners. I am a practicing attorney. I do own my law firm, Williams Law Group, which is not too far from here in Uptown Harrisburg at Front and Radnor Streets, where we primarily focus on criminal law and family law. We do a lot of post-conviction litigation as well, which is when a person has already been convicted and they're seeking relief from their conviction or sentence. We strongly advocate for people who are wrongly convicted, and that's something that I've been doing for the past 20 years, long before I was an attorney. Helping people who were either sentenced to death here in Pennsylvania or sentenced to life without parole, helping them with developing their cases, finding witnesses, and presenting any new evidence to a court for judicial review to see if we could get that judgment of sentence vacated and reversed. And so that's just a little bit about what I'm currently doing and currently pursuing.
Audience, I want you all to realize there's 67 counties, we'll just say Pennsylvania. There's 67 counties in Pennsylvania, and each county has a common police. And it's very important for you to understand that. They all have common police courts. But I want to start from the district justice at first. That is the first level. That is where we need to get people to run for district justice, because they will determine whether you will be on bail or not be on bail. They will determine many things for you. They will determine whether there's enough evidence for it to go to the next level. We walk around here and we don't understand the importance of that. And I can't tell you how much important it is, and she pretty well just said it to you. So district justice is important. Common police court is important. We have many more court systems in the system. But the one you really want to learn, to put it in perspective for you today, we can talk about the Supreme Court. You see the kind of rulings that the Supreme Court is ruling on. Now, I had told you, my audience, and I've told you this, before the Supreme Court of the United States ruled on affirmative action, I pretty well told you what was going to happen. And I was right. Based on the balance of the Supreme Court in terms of conservative, moderate, liberal, you have to have people who understand what you think and how you look at things. I'll give you a primary example, and then we can talk about it. I'm going to go back to the district justice. So you go in front of the district justice, and you being charged with something, and they say, okay, where are you going to live? And I say, well, Judge, I stay at my aunt's this week. I stay at my grandmother's next week, but I move all around. But I'm here. I'm in the community. Well, I understand that because that is somewhat way of life that I'm kind of used to in my community. But somebody else might look at it and say, well, if you don't have a permanent address, then I'm afraid I can't put you out on bail. Why? Because they don't understand it. That's important. And we'll have another conversation later on about bail, okay? We'll have a great conversation about bail. You don't, remember, you get charged. That ain't say you're guilty. But if somebody says to you, you need $1,000 and I'll let you out on bail, knowing that if you don't show up, I'm gonna get my $1,000, opposed to just putting you out on your own recognizance. If you get your own recognizance, they're telling you, okay, you can go out. You don't have to put no money up. Or you don't have to put no money up, no collateral, or you don't have to go find a bail bondsman. And bail bondsmen make a lot of money in Pennsylvania. They make a lot of money. Okay? That doesn't determine whether you're guilty or innocent. So that's why it's important to have, at the first level, district justices. And you need to run people that understand you. It's not about, ladies and gentlemen, I tell people, you want to have people who think and understand you. It's not about color. It's about the person who can think and understand about you. And you need to pick people like that, who understands the balance. Now we've all understood now after the last few months and years that we've always questioned the judicial system. Black Americans have always questioned the judicial system. We've always questioned police brutality. We've always questioned the FBI and all these other groups. And we've been saying a whole lot for so many years, but now all of a sudden, when people don't get the justice that they think or it looks at, then all of a sudden it's not fair. So I get tired of people come telling me that the justice system ain't fair when I've been telling you ever since I've been on this earth that the justice system is not fair. But it can be fair because that's all we got. Would you agree, Judge?
I would agree.
You notice I called you Judge, but I'm gonna correct it up. I called you Judge because I'm so excited that I hope that you're gonna be a judge, but you're running for office. But from a perspective of a lawyer, how do you perceive all of this?
I think that we have one of the greatest systems probably in the world in terms of this concept of justice and the concept of fairness, the concept of the federal constitution, where we are entitled to certain rights, such as the right to remain silent, the right to be heard by a jury of our own peers, the right to require the government to prove its case against us beyond a reasonable doubt, the right to confront witnesses. There's so many amazing rights embedded within our Constitution, and the concept of these rights, I think, is fantastic. The presumption of innocence, not having to prove your innocence, but requiring the government to prove your guilt. The problem, however, is that we live in a society where the people charged with executing those principles and concepts don't always do so in a fair manner. Whether the motivation is greed, money, or whatever the case may be. And so we want to ensure that as a people, we exercise our right to vote and use our voice to elect people into these positions because of the power that they're able to wield. And these should be people who we believe will do the right thing. But just speaking generally as to whether or not the way the system is stated on paper, it's a good system. We just have to have the right people in place to ensure that the system is functioning and operating the way it should.
Okay, I'm going to take a spin off of what you just said. Why do you think that it's important that we should get involved in being on the jury? And the reason I asked you that question, I heard everything that you said, that we should be willing participants. And if we're not willing participants, whether we don't vote or whether we don't want to be on jury duty, could you explain to my audience how that really affects us, especially jury duty? Because I want people to understand, we're going to take this step by step and I'm going to break it down. So let's talk about jury duty. Why do you think it's important? And you're a defense attorney, so why do you think it's important about, I want you to explain 3 things if you don't mind. Why it's important to be on a jury, and why it's important that we make sure that we participate, and people feel that they don't want to be on a jury, but how it helps us in terms of overall concept of, you said, Constitution, jury of our peers.
Okay, so we'll unpack that a while. First, I must say that it grinds my gears when people complain about having received notification in the mail about jury duty. That does not compute in my mind and in my brain. And I don't know if that's a reflection of their lack of understanding of the process. So let's unpack that, shall we? Every criminal defendant, well, depending on the charges, but just for the sake of argument, every criminal defendant is entitled to have a trial by a jury of their peers. So what does that look like? A jury of one's peers consists of citizens who are, living within a certain jurisdiction. So for our purposes, if we're talking about a state court proceeding, we would be talking about people who live in Dauphin County. And so from that citizenry, shall we say, notices are sent out randomly to people selected. And this pool is comprised of people from different databases, whether it's the PennDOT records, so people who have registered to operate a motor vehicle, so they have a driver's license or a state ID, various different databases. And so once that notice is received, the person is to report for jury duty. Is it, taking a day out of their life? Yes, but I think it's really critical because you are performing a duty, a service to your fellow citizens in the community, which is really important because once that pool is populated, then when it's time for trial to begin, and every county runs a little bit differently. So I'm speaking generally for, Pennsylvania counties, but once that pool is populated, a certain number of jurors will head into a courtroom. The judge may ask for 40 jurors or 50 jurors. It depends on the type of case it is, whether it involves misdemeanor charges versus felony charges. Is this a death penalty case? And so the judge will send for a random number of 40 or maybe 50 jurors to come up to the courtroom. And then from there, the lawyers and the defendant, so the accused person and their attorney, and then the prosecuting attorney on the other side, together will not pick a jury. We often hear of the term picking a jury. And it wasn't until I began practicing as a prosecutor that I realized you're not picking a jury. The jury is already picked. What you're doing is you're striking who you don't want. And that's kind of important. And that really changes the dynamic when you think of it in those terms of not picking a jury, but striking who you don't want to be on your jury. And so you engage in that process based off of little information. Prospective jurors have completed questionnaires prior to appearing for jury duty service on that day, and they've answered certain questions. And sometimes you can glean from their responses the type of juror that you may get, their responses in terms of their ability to be fair, their ability to treat the testimony of a police officer no differently than the testimony of just a regular lay witness. These are the types of questions that are posed to jurors on the questionnaires, and that can help a person decide if they want that person to remain on their jury or if they want to use one of their strikes to strike them off of their jury. And so the importance of serving as a juror, it's really helpful for the whole picture and not just one side over the other. It's helpful for the accused because you are in a position to listen to the facts. The role of the jury is to listen to the evidence, listen to the facts, listen to every witness who takes the stand and gives testimony about what happened or what did not happen, and then make a judgment call as to whether or not they believe that witness, whether they think that witness is lying, because that's not the role of the court. That is the sole province of the jury to make those fact-based decisions. And so, but the jury, in terms of the prosecution, who represents society in a criminal case, that role is equally as important because they're hearing from a victim, or if the victim is deceased, they're hearing from witnesses who may have had some exposure to the victim prior to that person being killed. And so, as a juror in Dauphin County, you could come from a variety of municipalities, such as the city of Harrisburg, the borough of Stilton. You've got Middletown, High Spire, Gratz, the other side of the mountain, Elizabethville, Berrysburg, Millersburg. And so Dauphin County is not just the city of Harrisburg, but it's the entire county. And so it's important that there's representation on the jury, whether it's a criminal jury or civil jury. We are talking criminal for the time being, so that the accused truly feels like they are being judged by a jury of their peers. And if certain people from a certain zip code feel like they should not respond to jury duty, then the accused is only going to have jurors on their jury from other zip codes within Dauphin County. And that's just not fair to the parties and to the process.
I think that's very important, and I'm glad that you kind of gave the whole scenario about jury duty. Yes, I have served on jury duty. I have also have been struck off of jury duty as well. I was on it, and they kicked me off because they struck me off because I knew everybody. I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but I did. But I have served on it. But I think what you said is very important, and that's why we need to talk about that so that we can understand the importance of jury duty. And I think that we're gonna have to start talking more about our civil duty, because that's very important. I'm gonna move on now. We done talked about the importance of serving on jury duty. Now you've played both roles, and when I say you played both roles, you've been a prosecuting attorney and you now a defense attorney. So that gives you the balance to look at things much different. So how have both of those roles, in your feeling, made you a better person to serve on the judicial court of running for judge?
Wow, thank you for that question. And remember, prior to me becoming a prosecutor, I did advocacy work for a really long time. So I wasn't an attorney at all. I was just, a regular old citizen, helping out fellow citizens who made compelling cases of actual innocence. And so I kind of sort of attribute or think of my legal career as having started from that point. And so I had a somewhat limited view and perspective in terms of how the machine functions, how the parts work, how it all comes together. But then when I became a prosecutor, that really opened my eyes up a lot. And I'm really glad that my path took the route that it took. So one thing and what I mean by that is, in my role as an advocate for the wrongly accused, I thought that there was this sort of marriage between police and prosecutors, and that they work very closely together at all times, at every aspect of the investigation and prosecution of a case. But then, of course, when I became a prosecutor, I learned that that wasn't accurate for many reasons. Oftentimes during an investigation, the investigator can change hands for various reasons. People change careers. People go out on maternity leave. There's all kinds of reasons. People get promoted, people get demoted. So that does happen. And also what I learned, having been a prosecutor, is that evidence is given to the prosecutor from the investigating agency, police department, oftentimes in piecemeal, not all at the same time. And so information and evidence will trickle in over the course of time. And that's something that I just did not know or realize. There are times when evidence slips through the cracks, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. And I think that our perspective as human beings from different walks of life all play a part in how an investigation is carried out. And so it's important that we have people in place who are familiar with just different people. And, just I've worked with victims, I've worked with the accused, I've worked in urban environments. I've worked in rural environments. I was a prosecutor, working in a city environment for the whole county, of course. But we had a lot of cases in the city. But then I was also a prosecutor where I had a lot of cases in a different county that was a bit more rural, suburban. And so it's important to have these different perspectives when seeking out a position such as judge, like I am doing. And now working as a defense attorney, I know certain questions to ask. I know where certain pieces of evidence can be found. And so it's about having, a level-headed, mature conversation with my opponent, because this might have been something that they have missed. And even recently I had a situation where I'd asked about a year ago for a body cam video from a police officer. The case involved a traffic stop. And those are really, really important, because based on what happens and what is depicted on that body camera footage can really answer a lot of questions that otherwise would have been unanswered, or otherwise would have been answered solely based on the law enforcement officer's perspective or his answer. And so it took a year, but finally we were able to get our hands on the body cam footage, which, and I used my words very carefully. I didn't accuse the officer of lying. I just said that the body camera footage was in contravention to what he previously testified to at a pretrial hearing. And I don't give anyone any slack or excuse inappropriate or unlawful behavior, but I do recognize that police officers have a tough job, and certain units within law enforcement who routinely do traffic stops 1,000,000 times a day and recover contraband out of vehicles 1,000,000 times a day. They're not going to always remember what occurred when it comes time to giving testimony months down the line. And so that's why body camera footage is very important. And so we were able to get a hold of that. And I think it will ultimately be favorable for my client. And so, but just having, this diverse professional background is very helpful in making sure that justice is served for my client and for the victims of crime as well.
What is your thought process on plea bargaining? And the reason I'm bringing plea bargaining up, if you go back and you look at the statistics, people of color have the highest rate of agreeing to plea bargain. Now, I'm smart enough to know a lot of it has to do with economics, because they can't afford a good lawyer. But plea bargain sometimes has been used against us, opposed for us, because you think about it, someone brings you in, they accuse you of this, they accuse you of this, they tell you you're going to do 25 years in jail if you do a jury trial. But if you agree to 15, you agree to the plea bargain of 15, you only get 15 years, then you accept it. So how do people need to handle this whole plea bargain thing? And that's something that we have not really, as a community, really talked about, that I think that's very important.
Yes, it is very important. The courts are just clogged up. That's just the reality of the situation. It really doesn't matter which county you're in. The courts are clogged with cases, but when it comes to criminal cases, prosecutors have to try cases or get them resolved within a certain amount of time, or else a person can petition for their case to be dismissed based on a court rule that requires a case to be disposed of within a certain amount of time. And so oftentimes plea bargaining is something that the parties engage in, and it serves a really good purpose, particularly when a person is guilty and looking to accept responsibility for what they've done. There's also the benefit of not exposing the victim if there is a victim. I guess there's technically always a victim society, but if we're talking of a case where, maybe a person is in unlawful possession of a firearm or that sort of thing, there's no like immediate direct victim of crime. But in those matters where there is a specific direct human being that is the victim, plea bargaining allows for that person to not have to relive the trauma of the crime that was perpetrated against them. And so I would say those are some of the benefits. The downside, I would say, particularly for the accused, is rushing into a plea bargain without the defense attorney having properly reviewed all of the discovery, which is just a fancy word for evidence, without having properly reviewed all of the discovery to see if there are any issues. And this is for someone who is guilty and particularly innocent, to see if there are any issues that can be litigated. And one, if nothing else, based on a procedural error or a procedural misstep. And so, and there's two different methods of pleading guilty. Some people don't realize. So you have what's typically called a negotiated plea, and then you have what's called an open plea. I don't like open pleas. So negotiated pleas is where both parties, so you have the criminal defendant and the prosecutor, have agreed on the charges that the person is going to plead guilty to, but there's also an agreement to the sentence that will be proposed to the court. And so in that instance, a defendant is not just blindly going in, not knowing what their punishment could be. Now, of course, ultimately it is up to the judge to accept the proposal. I mean, they usually do, but that's what a negotiated plea looks like. An open plea, which I just absolutely do not like, is where there is no agreement. The only agreement is that the person is pleading guilty. And then the judge will then impose sentence as he or she sees fit. It's really taking a chance because you just don't know what the judge is going to do. And, once you plead guilty under either scenario, you've greatly limited your appellate rights. And, a person who goes to trial, they can raise a litany of issues on appeal. The person who pleads guilty has limited their issues to 3 areas. One is typically like a foregone conclusion, and that's whether or not the court had jurisdiction or authority to impose sentence. And that's almost always going to be yes, because if the crime happened in Dauphin County and the person imposing sentence is a Dauphin County judge, well, there's the authority right there. And then the other 2 areas are whether or not the sentence imposed was an illegal sentence. And that can be various things, whether or not the sentence exceeded the lawful maximum. So for every crime, there's a maximum term of punishment. And so if a person is sentenced greater than that maximum term, then that's an illegal sentence. That's just one example of an illegal sentence. And then the third area for appellate review is whether or not the person entered their guilty plea involuntarily, unknowingly, or unintelligently. For example, a person enters a guilty plea, but that was, based off of information that maybe their lawyer provided to them about the law or about the facts of the case that turned out to not be true, then that was an unknowing or unintelligent or involuntary plea. But those are the only 3 areas. Like, you can't talk about whether the police misbehaved or during the traffic stop or during the search of your house. all of that goes out the window when you decide to plead guilty. So those are some things for consideration.
And let me ask you this here. Why do you think we don't understand the judicial system until it actually affects us? I would think that maybe what we need to do is start to educate people on the process. Because would you agree, because you're in the courthouse all the time, do you think that sometimes we just don't understand the judicial system itself? Even from the district justice part, which bugs me all the time, because I think we fall asleep on that. We don't realize how important it is, but all the way up to the Supreme Court, even the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So what's your overall process of that?
Yes, it seems that a majority, I don't even know like percentage wise what majority looks like, but I'll just say that there are a lot of people who do not understand the process and how everything works, beginning at the magisterial district court level. It's really unfortunate, and a lot of times they, I don't know, I think it's possibly a symptom of just not paying attention, and not worrying about something that in the moment does not immediately impact them or affect their life or their loved ones' lives.
But you said something else that, and then I want you to run down real quickly because time is moving very fast. I want you to go back over, because everybody assumes criminal or civil, but you talked earlier about the other things that could affect you that you don't think about. You talked about some of the things, whether it could be a will, or it could be moving a kid from here to there. So would you just elaborate that real quick for me, please?
Yes, I think that people just don't always think about, what happens until it happens, and it's not important until it is important. A lot of times with death, we're caught off guard, we're not prepared, we're scrambling around looking for stuff. And, in this day and age of digital information, digital files, it's important that we know the passwords to our loved ones' bank accounts, to, the utility companies, to the mortgage company, that we know those usernames and passwords. Because when someone passes away, of course, there's a very short period of time where we have to get them in the ground, or however we're going to, say our farewell to them. And so with that, though, comes the disposition of their property. And even just knowing if there is a will, knowing where is it. As an attorney, I belong to various bar associations, the State Bar Association and various county associations. And, we always get those emails where there's a request for the attorney who did the will of so-and-so. And that's because that person, so-and-so, has passed away and their family doesn't know where their will is. And so they reach out to the bar associations like, hey, like I need to find a lawyer that, did my granddad's will. But these are all matters that would be dealt with by the Court of Common Pleas, but it's not a thing until it is a thing, until that person.
So, right, so you say that, and you also talked about something about moving a child from one to another.
Mm-hmm.
The court makes those decisions.
Yes.
And people need to understand the court system is more than just criminal. Mm-hmm. It's just so many entities, and that's why you think it's so important. Time is going so fast, but now, of course, you and I know each other because of your advocacy, because you and I have set on a federal program that we both were part of, where we kind of mentored people that were coming out of federal prison. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of how me and you got to really know each other, even though we knew each other from your job is up. Real quickly, would you just talk about helping those in your earlier career where people were charged and you worked to try to help them get the wrong corrected?
Yes, that's some of the work I'm most proud of. And I'm proud of like a lot of stuff, but helping someone reclaim their life who was wrongly convicted is really a beautiful thing, because it allows them to come home from prison, and I can't even begin to relate to what it's like, living behind a 40-foot wall, stripped of freedom, stripped of dignity. And that's for something that you did do. So I can't even imagine it when you're there for something that you absolutely did not do. So yeah, it's a very long process. It's a marathon and not a sprint, because everything has to line up accordingly. Of course, I have faith in God and I pray, but it also involves connecting with really good people who are not afraid to do what's right, and that's on every side of the dynamic. On the defense side, of course, but as a defense attorney or as an advocate, you can advocate your heart out, but if it falls on deaf ears, if it falls on the ears of a prosecutor who is not willing to listen, who doesn't understand the issues, it doesn't really matter. If your advocacy falls on the deaf ears of a court who cannot relate, who does not know the law, and when I say relate, I mean how we perceive the facts of a case, how we perceive the veracity or the truthfulness of a witness's story. And this could be a witness who testifies one way, maybe for the government at trial, and then recants that testimony years later during a post-conviction hearing in favor of the defendant. If the jurist or judge who has the responsibility of determining, is this witness lying today during their recantation, or were they lying back then when they testified at trial a certain way? In order to really make that decision, you have to have an understanding of people. You have to understand how society works, and all of society, not just society in one zip code, in one part of the county, but in every zip code, in every part of the county, because it's a person's personal experiences and perspectives that shape their beliefs and help them determine whether or not a person is telling the truth. And that's really what all of this boils down to, is whether or not a witness or defendant is telling the truth about a situation, whether it's at the time of trial or years later when we're trying to get it right and get to the bottom of what happened and show that police or prosecutors misbehaved, hid evidence, destroyed evidence, manufactured evidence, coerced witnesses to lie, because these are things that do happen. And you have to have someone in position who recognizes that these things do happen. And that's tough because, judges work every day with, defense attorneys, prosecutors, police officers, and you have to have someone in position who's willing to acknowledge that these things do happen and recognize when a police officer is lying and call them out on it. And then not only call them out on it, but then reverse the harm that was done. And that's all about life experience and perspective to me.
I'm glad that you put that in perspective, and I'm glad that you have always been a champion for the little person. I'm glad that I had brought you on my program. Time is running so fast. They say run fast when you're having fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this again. Yes, I have supported you. I've known you a long time, but we've worked hand in hand. But I want to thank you for coming on, and I hope that the little time that we did talk, that ladies and gentlemen, put it in perspective for you to see some of the important things that you need to do. Not what I need to do, not what she needs to do, but what you need to do. What do you need to do? You need to look at finding candidates that understand us. Doesn't make a difference what color they are if they understand our plight. That's very important. It's very important. We have to hold them all accountable. So if you don't like certain things, and I bring this up all the time, if you have issues, then you become a policeman. You become one, and you do the right thing if you feel it's not that way. The same thing with running for magistrate. Same thing from running common pleas and whatever. But at the same time of saying all that, if we don't support those who support us, then shame on us. Lip service is wonderful, but we got to do some other things, whether it's financial, whether you're walking door to door with them, whether you're relating their message. And you will be very surprised, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to close with, you'll be very surprised because I am friends with a number of judicial people. Guess what? They're just like you. Talk to them. Share some of your experiences with them. They may not even be aware of it if you don't have a conversation. So let's not just say that everybody is mean or this and this, because sometimes it's about the facts and it's who presents the facts. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I would completely agree. My law firm, Williams Law Group, we just had a town hall in conjunction with Lorenzo Johnson. He was convicted here in Dauphin County years ago, I think 1996, of a murder that he did not commit. And July 11th, which was the date of the town hall this past Tuesday, was his 6-year anniversary. And so we convened over at the Nativity School of Harrisburg. Shout out to them for always being available and for creating space in the community for these types of events. And we had quite a robust panel of speakers, and we had some guest speakers who were people who were wrongly convicted. And they came and they shared their story because the theme of the town hall event was the causes and effects of wrongful conviction. And I thought that it was important for the panelists who answered questions to hear what these effects of wrongful conviction consist of. We had a state representative, we had our county district attorney, Fran Chardo, we had an attorney from the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, conviction integrity section, cross-section of individuals, a defense attorney, a prison reentry coach. And I think it was highly beneficial that they got to hear directly from the mouths of those directly impacted from wrongful conviction, like what that looks like. One of the speakers is the widow of a man who was convicted wrongly here in Dauphin County and was released a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, he had a medical event and passed away a little over a year ago. But hearing how, people who are wrongly convicted, it affects them as well as their family and as well as the community, as well as victims in the community, because if the wrong person was convicted and put away forever, then that means the true perpetrator is still free. And so there's no justice done to anyone under those circumstances. But it was nice that we could convene in the community to just dialogue and hear from one another, because at the end of the day, we all put on our pants the same way, and we all bleed red blood, last I checked. And so we just have to continue to have these discussions and move forward with making change. And we do that through legislation. So we just have to continue to educate people on how a bill, or how even a thought in someone's brain becomes a bill, and how that bill becomes a law. Civics is just something that, taken for granted. I got the memo. I was taught that in my home. These are issues that we talked about. I come from old school teaching, so just the schools I went to, we learned these things, and I just don't know, if these conversations are had in every household and are taught in every school. But we have to go back to that so that we can move forward.
Well, thank you very much. And for those of you, don't forget, even though this is aired today, and even though I do the first and third Tuesdays every month, but this program will rebroadcast on Tuesday in its place. I hope all of you have learned something today. If, as I've always said, this program, the title is Did You Know? The purpose of this program is Did You Know? But for you to go out and do your own research. Do your own due diligence. But understand that we have to do a better job of informing our families, our community, because if we don't, then shame on us. So thank you for tuning in. And Latasha Williams, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for
And I'm
having me.
going to probably bring you back again because I'm supporting you. So it's one thing to say one thing, but you got to do the due diligence. And I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that you learned something from this today. If nothing else, I want to leave you with this, the question mark. What did she say, and what did it mean to you, short term and long term? Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you for joining the Richard Utley Show on The Voice 17104. We will be here on The Voice 17104 every first and third Tuesday from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
What you say, Tasha?
Once again, thanks for joining. Remember to visit us on Facebook at Richard Utley, and we welcome your questions and/or comments.